what do we got going on today with Bundt Insurance?
Well, it's fixing to be spring, even though it's going to be really it's going to be really cold this weekend.
We've been saying that for a while now.
Yeah. So I always kind of think that Texas is like, The Hobbit? Remember, we have.
No, I have no idea.
You don't know that?
No.
So we have first winter, second winter, fall, spring, next spring, real spring, back to second winter.
Yeah.
I think this is like fourth winter.
Yeah, I think we're in fourth winter right now. But it is going to be spring, and spring brings a lot of nice things, but it also brings weather that can be detrimental.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk today about basically wind and hail coverage for your home or your building. That's what we're going to talk about. Because like I said, I'm not going to say this too loud. I'm going to knock on wood. We haven't in Graham had a bad hailstorm
until tomorrow.
And since that time that we were at Ridgemar.
Yes, that was 1985.
Yeah, that was, well, we were already married. It wasn't 85.
1986.
Anyway, that was the last, I think it was in the 90s. But regardless, that was our last
in the 1990s.
Big one. But it still can happen. And so what we want to talk to you today is, do you know how your insurance is written on to cover your roof for wind and hail damage?
Because all these insurance policies, they're just contracts between you and the insurance carrier. And they all read a little differently. And with hailstorms and wind, each company will change it up just a little bit to help out what they need or what their customers need. The problem is there's no standard version of it. So the best thing to do is, before we have these hailstorms, before we have these wind events, is to figure out what your contract says, to get familiar with it, to understand it, to read it. And so that way when you do have a hail event or a wind event, you're just like, okay, this is what I'm here to expect. Instead of like, oh, what do you mean my roof is only going to get $500 instead of the $10,000 I thought I was going to get? Well, you should have read your policy.
Yeah, that's what I was sitting there thinking, because if someone wrote a policy even 3 years ago, I mean, it's probably something you need to check into.
Yeah, we recently had hail damage at our house.
Yeah, I know.
And, of course, I knew how our coverage was going to work, and that's exactly how it's working, and so it's not a surprise. But, so some of the things that you'll see, this isn't very common anymore, but there's what is called a flat deductible, which means your deductible is $1,000 or $2,500 or whatever. That's a flat deductible. That means you have the damage, they are going to pay the actual cash value less your deductible. And then if your policy works this way, when you replace it, they pay the difference. So that's your deductible. That's one way, but it's not very common in North Texas to see that.
We do the percentage basis.
Yeah, and most of the carriers, that's what they're doing, is a percentage.
So on that it's the deductible. So sometimes you'll have an occurrence deductible for everything other than wind and hail, and then you'll have your separate deductible for wind and hail. And most of the time it's usually 1% or 2% of the policy limit. So let's say if you have a $100,000 home, if you have a 1% deductible, $1,000.
Okay.
Simple as that. I mean, it's a real simple calculation, but what happens is when we have values of homes going up, we have increased construction costs, which increases the limits of your home, which then your deductible will increase. So if you recently increased your if you recently increased your limits to reflect the building costs and all that, you might want to also look at the cost of your deductible, because now instead of looking at $1,000, you might be looking at $2,000, $3,000.
Right.
And then another thing that is important to know is, do you have replacement cost coverage? That's important.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's, you have a 10-year-old roof, and all of a sudden they hit you with actual cash value, and you're like, oh, so I'll be paying for the roof out of my own pocket. Excellent.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I don't know, I want to compare it to, but it's kind of like that gap insurance, I guess, what you see, and that you're gonna have to make up the difference because you were underinsured.
Right, and replacement cost means, just like I said, on our roof, we got a check, which was the actual cash value. Once we do the work, we send in the receipts, they pay the difference. That's replacement cost. So you're going to get what? But if you don't have replacement cost coverage, that check that we got, that's it. That's all you're getting.
Okay.
So, and then another thing that we see is on metal roofs, particularly what are called hail resistant roofs.
And cosmetic exclusion.
There's an exclusion for cosmetic damage,
Mm-hmm.
which means if it just makes it look, if it hits it and it dents it, but it didn't really damage, then they're not paying for that.
Right.
So that's very, very common on the metal roofs.
Right. They'll throw that in there every now and then because I mean it will save premium, but then on the other hand you're like, well, no, I got a dented roof. So these are things that you need to look into. Are you willing to take the cosmetic exclusion? Are you not? Those are things you need to look into before the incident occurs.
Do insurance companies encourage metal roofs over the, or does it really matter?
Well, if it's the hail resist, not just a regular
Like a
metal
class
roof, but
4.
there's hail resistive roofs that the state requires, if a person has that on their home, the state requires their insurance company to give them a discount
Okay.
because it's hail resistive. And so the insurance company, anytime you tell the insurance company what to do, they're going to be like, okay, but so we'll give you the discount, but we're not paying for it unless it really damages it where there would be an opening in the roof. Okay. So there's that. And then there's another thing that we've seen a little bit on homeowners policies with some carriers is the older the roof gets, there's a depreciation, that's not really what it's called, but there's a scale down. So if you have a brand new roof, they're going to pay replacement cost. If it's 10 years old, it's going to be less, and then you get to the point where we're not paying replacement cost at all. So there's just, in other words, there's just tons of things that you can see.
Well, they do that with autos now where like the first 3-year models you get replacement and then after that's ACV. That's the same thing with the roofs. After so many years, they'll drop off the replacement and just add ACV. And that's something that you also got to worry about if you've always had the same policy for the last 10 years. And you're like, oh, I have replacement costs. Well, do you really? You need to look into it.
So, like we always say, the time to learn about this is before you have a claim.
Right.
A claim is a great education, but it's not a fun education.
Well, we've already had one hail incident come through here, and it wasn't it wasn't a sustained one, but it was enough to do a lot of damage. So we don't want to have this again. So if you are not sure, you need to give you guys a call to find out what they need to do to check their policy out. Or if you don't have a policy, you need to get this done, or whatever the case may be, we need to give a hold of you guys. So how's the best way to do that?
You can come see us, second floor Ciera Bank in Graham, 940-549-2525, or in Hudson Oaks, 2950 Fort Worth Highway, Suite 500, 817-770-0096, or online.
Oh, yeah, BrianINS.com. That's Brian with a Y.
Right with the one.